Father in heaven, we appreciate you. We honor you. Really, truly, nobody like you. All of the earth. Thank you, Father, for the opportunity that we have to come into your house of worship, to adore you, to magnify, to worship and praise your name, Father. You are so good, so great, so merciful, so kind. Thank you that you have demonstrated love toward us and you have proven yourself to us over and over again. Showing us your mercy, showing us your kindness, giving to us opportunity to magnify, to praise your name, to study, to understand the word. This is such a great privilege, Father, that you give to us. Call us your children. Love us with an everlasting love. You have chosen, desire, Father, to communicate with us. Thank you that you show yourself strong. Father, you reveal the truth to us. It's not from our own intellect, knowledge, that we know what we know is because you have shared it, shown to us, you have revealed to us. Thank you that not only do we articulate what it is that you expect of us, and we make the hard decision that we're going to do what we say, we'll be obedient vessels of the Spirit. Thank you for just really showing yourself strong on our behalf, really causing us to see the wonder of you. Bless you, praise you, honor you, and appreciate the King is here. Father, we appreciate your presence. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to worship you, to magnify and praise your name. Lord, you, Father, thank you that in this moment allow us to live in the truth that you call us to understand fully and completely. Give you glory, give you praise, in the name of Yeshua. It's like we pray. Amen. Good morning, everybody. And Shabbat Shalom. Of course, grateful always again to be with our Father in this house, magnifying and praising Him, thanking Him, appreciating Him for His word that is what governs, rules our lives. So we are desirous of the opportunity to dig into these treasures, to understand fully that which the Father is wanting us to understand, wanting to appreciate everybody's thoughts and prayers. I don't know that I even really articulated, but we lost I lost a cousin, 38 cousin, last week, and his funeral service this past Thursday morning. And so we solicit the prayers for our families, and my cousins on the dad's side, Jefferson County officer, who lost his battle with COVID. And so we're just, keep the family that had the opportunity to just share some love, kindness with them. Continue to pray for Lady April. She's still with her mom and God. She's recovered. But she's with her mom. She had to delay a little bit. They had a few little complications in between. They were able to get the comments. We're grateful for that. And that mom number two. So that's good. I wanted to jump right back into what we have been discussing. And I wanted to go, I believe, through the end of Persecuted 3. So we want to get right back into that and really talk about persecution. And I really want to dig into that. The sort of talking about the church, chapter 4. But 1 Peter chapter 3. And then we're right next to 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8 Finally, all of you be in one in mind and in feeling. Love his brothers, be compassionate and humble minded, not repaying evil for evil, or insult with insult, but on the contrary with blessing. For it is to this that you have been called, so that you may receive a blessing. Whoever wants to love life and seek good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Turn from evil and do good, seek peace and chase after it. For the Most High keeps his eyes on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayers. But the face of the Most High is against those who do evil things. For who will hurt you if you become zealous for what is good? But even if you do suffer for being righteous, you are blessed. Moreover, don't fear what they fear, or be disturbed, but treat the Messiah as holy as ruler in your hearts, while remaining always ready to give to anyone who asks you to explain the hope that you have in you, yet with humility and with fear, keeping your conscience clear, so that when you are spoken against, those who abuse the good behavior flowing from your Messiah may be put to shame. Or if Yah has in fact willed that you should suffer, it is better that you suffer for doing what is good than for doing what is evil. We had a conversation so briefly about talking about that there are times where we can cause suffering upon ourselves just for engaging in flesh to flesh battle and flesh to flesh conflict really not people. And if we're able to understand that, then that helps us to be able to better overcome. So let's go on to First Peter chapter 14, talk about that. Verse number 14. Sorry, First Peter 4, verse number 14. First Peter 4, verse 14. If you are being insulted because you bear the name of the Messiah, God bless you. It's amazing to me how many times we see that connection between suffering and being persecuted and being blessed. It's over and over and over and over again that we're seeing this. So he says, if you're being insulted, if you're being insulted because you bear the name of the Messiah, how blessed you are. For the spirit of the Shekinah, which is the spirit of God, is resting on you. Let none of you suffer for being a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or a meddler in other people's affairs. But if anyone suffers for being a believer, let him not be ashamed, but let him bring glory to the Father by the way he bears his name. For the time has come for judgment to begin. It begins with the household of God. It starts with us. What will be the outcome for those who are disobeying? So, again, he's repeated, the reality of let us not be suffering for doing evil. There's a difference between suffering because you're doing evil, because you're doing wrong, actually suffering for the cause of Messiah. And remember, one of the things I kept saying on last week is that the cause clause is important. It's important that we understand what is the reason why the suffering is coming. Fact remains, sometimes what we suffer in some ways is kind of like a reaping what we sow. Sometimes it's just something that we've done, and sometimes we receive repercussions. Even if you look at Shaul prior to him making the conversion and turning over and embracing Yeshua, he was a fierce persecutor. He was there at the time, the gentleman I referred to, Stephen, he was there at the time he was being so Holy Ghost. And so he was, had letters from the Sanhedrin and, had been given the commission to carry out the persecution of those who were followers of the way. And had his conversion in Damascus at the time, turned around, but then it was explained to him, that he was going to have to suffer, some of the things that he had to suffer. read about his journeys, you read about things that happened to him, he took it like a champ. Took it like a champ. Matter of fact, even when he got to the end of his life, all he asked for was happiness, so that he could write his final letter and say, he said, I'm about to be offered up, about to be poured out like a drink offering. He says, I just want to write to y'all one more time, to explain to you about the reality. This is when he says, I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Remember, we talked about the faith being the body of truth. Okay, it is not just that's not just a random statement. That's an exclusive statement. And so, the note that I wrote here is that we'll go over to Romans chapter 5. This point, fear persecution will be the cause of compromise as we move forward. Fear persecution will be one of the things that will cause to have a willingness to compromise. The fear of the safe place to prevent, myself with having to do any type of, significant suffering. Suffering, persecution is not something we can do. But consistent pursuit of righteousness under persecution develops the character and okay, Romans chapter 5. Romans chapter 5. Romans chapter 5. And let's look at verse number 3. Romans chapter 5. Chapter 3. And then it will be Romans chapter 5, verse number 3. Says also, so since we have come to be considered righteous by God because of our trust, let us continue to have shalom through our ruler, Yeshua Messiah. Also through him and on the ground of our trust, we have gained access to this grace in which we stand. So let us boast about the hope of experiencing God's glory, but not only that, let us also boast in our troubles, because we know that trouble produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And this hope does not let us down because God's love has already been poured out in our hearts through Ruach HaKodesh. So he makes it very, very clear, as I made here in the note, that consistent pursuit of righteousness under persecution develops character and produces hope. So our character is developed in the process of our suffering. I think I've talked before about the reality that he does work miracles. But miracles, those instantaneous things, those things that happen in moments, those things are very, very much strengthening to our faith. But his development of our character is what happens through the process of us suffering. So he says that, we'll read that again. He says, but not only, verse number 3, but not only that, let us also boast in our troubles, because we know that trouble produces endurance. Trouble produces endurance. That word trouble, I discovered. Okay. Okay, so the word trouble, I found the word picture. Of course, it sort of looks like a hook, this letter, and then there's man. So I found that the word trouble means a hook. It's like, you know, I'm not a professional fisherman, but it's like, you get that hook in the jaw of the fish, at that point, he's being reeled in, get out of it, you know. And the reality of trouble is something that, we can't avoid. Trouble finds us, a lot of times trouble just shows up. We have trouble. And remember, we talked about the reality that trouble, trial, suffering, tribulation is something that's a promise that we're going to have. In this world, you're going to have tribulation. I think it was Job that said, man that is born of a woman is of a few days and full of trouble. So trouble is something that we experience. Trial is something that we experience. Right? Yeshua says to his disciples, in this world you have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I will overcome the world. You're going to experience trouble. It's just going to happen. Every now and then we're like that hooked man. Okay. So trouble, and I'll get a little bit more into it. But when trouble comes, the person who is without the right thing in the midst of trouble often succumbs to, submits to the trouble. They don't necessarily endure the trouble, submit to the trouble. The trouble negatively impacts them, affects them, brings them to the point of suicide, brings them to the point of trouble, brings them to the point of reaching for so many other different things. And this is why the Father, in his dealings with us, according to what we read, I think I've said before that sometimes, I remember, back when I would be, when we're suffering through certain things, where I would often pull out this passage way out of context, and I would not even pull it exactly the way it is. I would say, Father, you said that was going to be my escape. Now get out of this situation, thinking about this. If I say that, and of course, I later learned, of course, number one, he wasn't talking about capability to it. But then I realized that passage really, if you look at it, talks about the fact that he is faithful and he will not allow us to suffer that above which we're able to withstand. So the temptation makes a way of escape. There's the latter part of it. He makes a way of escape that you may be able to live. Okay, how does escape and bearing the thing, how does that, how does that coincide? What do you mean? In my Western mind, escape means I'm free from it. I'm done with it. I'm away from it. But he says, no, I'm going to give you the ability. And Shaul's example of that is probably the clarity for it, I would say. When he goes to the Father 3 times and asks him, take the thorn from me. When you take the thorn from me, he says, no, I'm not taking that thorn from you. I'm gonna let you be buffeted, because he's gonna give them all these revelations and all this kind of stuff like that. So he said, what you get, lifted up above measure. So I'm gonna keep you buffeted in your flesh. And he says, understand that my grace is sufficient, and that my strength is made perfect. And he doesn't take away his goal for us is development, that we develop, and our development does not effectively happen without us having moments, periods, times, seasons of suffering. And one of the things we used to say a lot of times when we were in some of the other circles is when things were going well and everything was, putting smiles on our face and that sort of thing like that. We were happy about what's going on in life in the moment. I remember people still do it sometimes. They would always often make the statement, "It's my season. Yes, it's my season." And I realized just by understanding that the Father shared with me, it's always our season. No matter what season we're in, it's always our season. What we have to do is discern the season that we are in and understand what we need to do, respond appropriately. What are you trying to teach me right now in the season I'm in? Because we go through seasons and those seasons change. And sometimes we go through periods and seasons of something. We go through those seasons, but those are not the intention behind that is not to break us, it's not to destroy us. The intention behind that is to develop us. So he says, trouble. The reason why we're glorying, why we're rejoicing in our trouble is because it is the trouble that produces goodness. You won't go the distance, right? You know, at one point in time, I was faithful 3 days a week. Faithful, I mean, at it for a long period of time. I was just in there, boom, 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 boom. And then we started coming up on the point where COVID came, and down, lazy, just not really even making an effort to exercise outside the gym. And so now I'm in the place of trying to get back, but I can't do what I was doing at that point. I mean, I was 10 minutes straight running on a treadmill. Okay? If I do 2 minutes now, that's hour. Right? Because it was that resistance that I was experiencing constantly that got me to the point where I developed. I didn't just jump on the treadmill the first time and run for 10 straight minutes. I barely walked for 10 straight minutes the first time I got it. But the more I experienced, and eventually I got where I could put a little incline, pick the pace up just a little bit, you know. But that endurance did not come automatically. That endurance came over a process of development, right? A challenge, of dealing with that experience with treadmill. That challenge is what got me to the point where I was able to come to a point where I could actually do it. And endurance is going to be key in persecution. The endurance has got to be developed. I can't. It's impossible for us to really be able to endure the reality of what is ahead of us unless the Father faithfully allows us to experience the challenges and things along the way. It's all a part of the process. It's all a part of his development for us. Because without endurance, I mean, how are you going to endure to the end without endurance being developed? So it's the trouble that produces the endurance. The perspective that we have on it can really, hurt us, right? But we want to have the proper perspective, because if we don't have the proper perspective, then we don't understand the reality of the process that is necessary. So he says, trouble produces endurance, endurance produces character, character produces hope. Hope or paid by hope. It's the Hebrew. Tikva is how it's pronounced. Tikva. The word hope in the word picture. No, that's hey. I got that one now. That's hey. And then this other one is almost kind of like a Bob. Okay. So we're looking at in the word without sequel. And the word picture is what comes from the nail, what comes from the strength. That's what hope is. Hope is like it's like a rope or like a mountain climber, like a rock climber. That rope is connected to something that's up at the top of where they're climbing, and to give themselves reassurance while they're coming up that little mountain, they'll pull on that rope, right? Kind of gives them some reassurance. Okay, it's still there. I'm still kind of anchored. I still got something I can hold on to while I'm making my way up. Right? This is what hope does for us. And he says hope does not. At the end of the day, he says hope does not make us ashamed. This hope does not make us ashamed. We're not the secular understanding of it. I would even dare to say the Western understanding. Sometimes it's very abstract, sometimes it's very whimsical. It's more of wishing, right? It's not necessarily founded on something or established or provided by something solid. It's not necessarily solid. It's like a really big wish. Really, when a lot of times when the Western understanding uses the terminology hope, it's really I would say really more defined. I'm really hoping this is my hopes and my dreams. That's what it's all about. But when we're talking scripturally about the term hope, we're not talking about something that's established and something that is just out there and I just, it's a wish. No, no, no. This is something that is firmly rooted. I trust him. Firmly rooted in my trust, right? Trust, we went to Hebrews last week. And we read about those people that would know this and all different things, whatever that happened to them. By trust, they did this. By trust, they did that. All of those were connected to instructions that were given by the Father. It wasn't something that came out of their own dream, their own desire, their own wishes. It's not where it came from. And remember, we talked about the genesis of true spiritual faith. It does not start with us. We are not the starting point. Our desire is not the starting point of true spiritual biblical trust. It's not. That's not the true genesis of true biblical scriptural faith. Romans chapter 10, faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word. Right? So there's instructions. Those instructions, we follow those instructions. The Most High responds favorably from those instructions that evidence of faith. How they quote that in the faith. So faith is something that the Father has given to us that is anchored in faith, hope, love. Those things are anchored in the reality of our connection, our relationship with Him. Word, truth, Torah, right? Faith, substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. Okay? So this hope makes not ashamed. The wishing on the star does. And what is I think Proverbs says hope deferred makes the heart sick. So it's important that we understand that the Father's truth is strong, and hope comes as we are secured to Him and His ways. You understand? That's what it is. What comes from the nail? What comes from the string? Right? What comes from the nail? What comes from the string? His truth is strong, and hope comes as we are secured to Him and His ways. Because you talk about the vial, the nail, it's all about securing something. And that's what the nail does, secure. So when we are secured to Him and His ways, this is what produces the hope that lies within us. So this is why earlier when we read in First Peter, when he says that I'm able to give answer to every person for the hope that lies within me, That's not something that's based on something abstract. That's solid. That's firm. That's true. And so because I understand that my hope is not built on a fairy tale. It's not established upon something abstract. It's upon something that is very solid. I have a solid answer for the hope that lies within. There's sometimes we've had discussions with people, and you know, kind of we've asked, Adrian and I, so we've asked people, are you certain that you're willing to be wrong about what I'm sharing with you about the hope that's lying within you? Oh, and those conversations are going everywhere. And really, at the end of it, you find out that people really have come to the place of being they really have to come to being their own God. And no matter how they explain it, we can explain and articulate intelligently. Not that this comes from our intelligence, but we can intelligently articulate why we believe what we believe, who we believe in. It's firm, it's established, rooted. I'm not guessing if the Most High is real. I'm not guessing if He exists. I'm not guessing if His plan is true and real and evident in our lives. I'm not guessing if Yeshua is Messiah. I'm not guessing about any of that. I don't doubt who He is. I know who He is, right? Charles said in one place, I know Him in whom I have believed. I'm not guessing. I know with a certainty that He is who He says He is. He does what He says He will do. And everything that He has said will surely come to pass. No doubt. No doubt at all. So when I'm articulating that, I'm not articulating something that comes from somebody who is using a religious belief, or as they try to say, a religious belief or ideology as a crutch, because that we've experienced trauma and emotional things, and so we just got to find something to anchor ourselves in. No, this is a reality. This is the truth. This is what I truly, honestly believe. And because I truly, truly, honestly believe, you see, all things are, we're told in the record, all things are written aforetime for our learning, that we be patient. So when I read what I read, when I read the examples of what took place in those who came before us, when I look at and read about the disciples who were persecuted and beaten, and like we said in Hebrew, that ordered how long sawn in half and all this kind. When I read about those different things and saw that they were tenacious in their pursuit of righteousness and tenacious in their proclamation of truth, it's an example for me. And to know, and then when you read that at the end of Hebrews 11 chapter, when you read it, says that a lot of them died not ever seeing. They never saw the full reality of what they were believing or what they were hoping for. They never saw, but they gave of themselves. They gave of their lives. I told y'all last week that when they whipped them, put them in jail, let them out of jail. They got out of jail, commanded, go back and do this again. And they got out of jail and went right back proclaiming the good news. That doesn't come from just a mere human experience. That doesn't come from humanity. That comes from a relationship and a connection with the Father, with the Most High. That comes from a reality of, as we just read the record, that you're able to do it because Ruach is there dwelling within you. And that Ruach HaKodesh empowers our ability to suffer for the sake of Messiah. Unfortunately, a lot of our religious circles, the idea of Ruach HaKodesh is goosebumps, overwhelming feelings, happiness, right? But the reality is that part of this, he's our helper. And part of his ministry to us is to empower us, to equip us to actually make something. We've been equipped to do it, right? Say that in Romans chapter. Verse 21. So we who are strong have a duty to bear the weakness of those who are not strong, rather than please ourselves. Each of us should please his neighbor and act for his good, thus building him up. For even the Messiah did not please himself. Rather, as the Tanakh says, the insults of those insulting you, for everything written in past, that is, for everything written in past time, in the past, was written to teach us, so that with the encouragement of the Tanakh, of the written record, with the encouragement of the written record, we might patiently hold on throughout. These are not fairy tales, and these are not as some of the Freemasons would have you believe that it's just allegory, and it's just positive stories that teach positive messages, positive lessons for life, and principles of life. It's more. This is a reality. These things that we read about really happened. These were real people, okay, who suffered real things, who saw a real Mashiach, saw a real Messiah, who testified of the fact, who were witnesses. The word witness in the Hebrew is a word that means, to see the Lord. They were actually eyewitnesses. They were actually able to testify of the reality. When there was even a Torah principle that a person could never come and testify on hearsay. You could never come and present yourself as a witness if you had not seen what had taken place, what occurred. Your testimony was invalid. So it's interesting that he speaks to his disciples and tells them, Ruach HaKodesh is going to come upon you, and then you will be my witnesses in Judea, Samaria, and to the uttermost parts. So they actually saw him, they actually walked with him, they actually talked with him, and they actually had the opportunity to witness. They actually saw him, and they actually testified of the reality. And that's why they told him, we can't help but testify to that which we have seen and heard. We know what we're talking about. We know that who we are proclaiming is they declared it among all with confidence and with boldness. So again, his truth is strong, and hope comes as we are secure and to our attitude must be like that of Yeshua. And it's definitely possible for us to have that attitude. I think I talked about the word joy. Psalm 119, verse 116. Psalm 116. Psalm 119, verse 116. Attitude like that of Yeshua is possible. We can have a proper attitude when we are suffering persecution. All right. I'm going to use your fingers. Hang on, hang on to Psalm 119. And just go to Psalm 19 first. Psalm 19, verse 8. We won't have to hold you from the All right. The precepts of the Most High are right. Okay. Now, up above that, verse number 7, really, I probably should read that. The Torah of the Most High is perfect, restoring the inner person. That the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The instruction of the Most High is sure, making wise the thoughtless. The precepts of the Most High are right. And look at the benefit. Rejoicing the heart. The mitzvah of the Most High is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Most High is clean, enduring forever. The rulings of the Most High are true, they are righteous, altogether more desirable than gold, and than much fine gold, also sweeter than honey or drippings from the honeycomb. Through them your servant is warned, in obeying them there is great reward. All about his Torah, all about his commands and his instructions to us, all about us understanding how important and how connected this is. Oh my gosh, this is what we need the understanding of when we talk about it. So he says that the precepts, verse 8, of the Most High are right, rejoicing the heart. Let me read Psalm 119 before we take our finger out of it. Psalm 119, verse 1. Uphold me as you promised, and I will live. Don't disappoint me in my hope. Support me, and I will be saved. Always putting my attention on your Torah. Okay, so Psalm 19, he makes it clear that his Torah rejoices the heart. I just thought to myself, how is it that Shaul is talking about rejoicing in the midst of tribulation, rejoicing in the midst of trial? It can't be that he's happy about what's going on. It can't be that he's happy about what he's experiencing. It can't be. There's got to be something else that makes sense, because to be happy about having a bunch of negative experiences, I don't know, that maybe something that's a mental instability happening going on. But no, he's talking about the ability. Why is he talking about the ability to rejoice? Why? What would be the source of joy? It definitely cannot be the negative experience. That can't be what the source of the joy is. There has to be some other source of joy. Can't be my experience. So I took the liberty to look up the word joy, delight, rejoice. Found the word sameach, to support, to uphold. Joy, to support, to uphold. It is not at all tied to, connected to anything external. It's not influenced by anything external. It's not challenged by anything external. As a matter of fact, Shaul, when he makes a description of it, he calls it joy unspeakable, full of it's something that goes beyond the ability of description. It's something that actually happens within us as a reality of knowing who our Messiah is, who by the way was the greatest example of showing us how to suffer. When you read in Hebrews chapter It talks about looking to Yeshua, who's the author, finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the execution, despising the shame. Now, of course, he despised the shame. Yet there was joy that was before him, and the joy that was set before him caused him to focus. The emphasis was not on the suffering. It was not on what was happening to him. It was not on what was happening around him. It was on what was up ahead. The focus was. The joy that was something that came from within. It's our connection, our relationship to the Most High, to the Father, that connects us. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Trying to get to this other. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Verse number 10. And we just made reference to this, but this is the latter part of what he said after he talked about his grace was enough for him. Power brought the perfection of weakness. But he told me, my grace is enough for you. My power is brought to perfection in weakness. Therefore, I am very happy to boast about my weaknesses, in order that the Messiah's power may rest upon me. Now, you do understand that it's all about a posture of humility, right? I cannot do this in my own strength, and I cannot do it in my own power. It's a posture of humility. That's the reality of suffering persecution, of suffering the things of suffering. I can't do it in my own strength, my own power. But through his power, his strength, okay, I can do it. And it's interesting that he used the term grace, right? Grace says, my grace is sufficient, my strength is made perfect in your weakness. And we understand that the Father resists the proud, but it's to the humble that he gives grace. Those who admit, I cannot do. I think that was a hymn that back in the day they kind of, I think, captured the essence of it. I know one was, we sung it as children, when we sung. There's a little verse in there, right? It captured the essence of the reality that the strength comes from him, not from us. Right? Then Shaul, of course, says, very familiar passage, people hold a lot of things. Sure, right? Who gives me the strength? And if you read that in the context of what he was saying before he got to that verse, all he was talking about was something. Then he says, I am broken. And sometimes that's made, the application of that is used elsewhere. But the context of him saying, I can do all things through the side of strength to me is he was talking about all the suffering that he. So he says, verse 10, yes, I am well pleased with weakness, insults, hardship, persecutions, and difficulties endured on the behalf of the Messiah, for it is when I am weak. Because it's not my strength. I don't know if you ever read this, it's like a prose poem. They used to have a lot of class and stuff. It's called Footprints in the Sand. Remember that? And when you read the Footprints in the Sand, we talked about the fact you don't saw one set of footprints in the sand like that. That's the reality. I have had moments where I did not think that if I had thought about going through those things prior to going through those things, in my mind, I would not have seen myself back in 2006 when my first sister passed away. I'm 2 years older than her. I'm 28. She's 26. In my mind, I would never fathom that to be a reality. I'm thinking, as a young person, we're thinking death is something way down. Always thinking you can done. But what a sobering moment, to experience that and see that happen, and then to have the responsibility of delivering all those things. And in my mind, I remember the day just like it was yesterday. I'm standing in the mirror, and in my mind, I'm thinking, I cannot do this. And it was kind of like I was within myself and not within myself. It was weird. It was like I was within myself and not within myself at the same time. And the whole time I'm saying, in my mind, not out of my mouth, in my mind, I'm saying, I don't think I can do this. I'm doing it. Like I'm actually getting depressed while I'm having something, and to actually stand up that day and actually be able to, deliver, you know, I couldn't have imagined it. There are things like that you just don't think. And at that time, there was so many different things going on. Divorce proceedings after 30 something marriage. Brother was locked in prison. Baby sister was, kind of back and forth in the hospital. So many things going on at the same time. And you could imagine what it would be like to think that all this is going on at the same time, yet, you're withstanding that. You have to have something else that goes beyond human capacity, to bear up under all of that and not absolutely lose it, not absolutely go off, or not, absolutely become, a drug addict, or, jump off a building. You really have to be grounded in something way more solid than the human capacity to do it. You have to have that. So this is when I'm weak, then I'm strong. Okay. Real quick, let's go over to James 1. Yaakov, James 1. James 1. Look at verse number 2. Another witness. Regard it as all joy, my brothers, when you face various kinds of temptation. For you know that the testing of your trust produces perseverance. But let perseverance do its complete work, so that you may be complete and whole, lacking nothing. It's the process, right? It's the essential process. I mean, I know our human understanding, we all say the same things in maybe varied ways. We all feel like anytime we're suffering, it is so unfair, and in some ways we even feel like, we're excluded. It almost feels like sometimes when you're going through what you're going through, it feels that way. It feels like, you're all alone, in this fight. Nobody's going through the same way you're going through. Yours is worse than the other person. We all feel those things are not necessarily. But he says, let perseverance do its complete work in you, so you may be complete and whole, lacking nothing. He says, now if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in trust, doubting nothing, for the doubter is like a wave in the sea being tossed into the water. Indeed, the person should not think that he will receive anything from the Most High, because he is double-minded, unstable in all his ways. And we're not talking about something that's flip-flop. Now skip down to verse number 12. You can read the whole thing in context. But skip down to verse 12. How blessed is the man who perseveres through temptation. For after he has passed the test, he will receive as his crown the life which God has promised to those who love him. No one being tempted should say, I am being tempted by Yah, for he cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one. Rather, each person is being tempted whenever he is dragged off and enticed by the bait of his own desire. Okay? Bait of his own desire. So it's kind of you're pulled in that direction by your own desire, not the Father doing this to you. Right? But James says, listen, this is not strength. The temptation, the trials that we do, it's not strength. It's something that's come into reality. We are going to have these things happen to us, but count it all joy. When I studied this like all the way out, and I got to the understanding, we're going to go to the second chapter for this moment. When I studied out and got the proper understanding, again, I keep saying everything Yeshua said in Matthew chapter 5. You know that's what talk about the persecution. Everything that he's saying is pointing all the way back to forward. Listen, no matter how you draw the line, all of the lines go all the way back to his instructions. And I love it. Okay? All right. Before we go into the other part of the treasure and understanding that, how that all ties in, understand that the love of the Most High is also a fact. Okay? His love has to be active, right? And his love is shed abroad in our hearts by Ruach HaKodesh. Yeah, right? So that's even the other thing that comes to action. How do you even have the capacity to love your enemies without Ruach? You don't have the capacity to do it. Don't possess it. None of us do. Okay. Romans chapter 8. Let's look at that. And after Romans chapter 8, you can flip right over to Isaiah chapter 4. All right. Romans chapter 8. Verse 38. Verse 35. Who will separate us from the love of the Messiah? Trouble, hardship, persecution, hunger, poverty, danger, war, as the Tanakh puts it. I really like how out where it very clearly distinguishes where he is quoting or he's quoting from what we would refer to as the Old Testament. He says, as Tanakh puts it. So this is not again Shaul introducing a new concept. He's explaining something that's been written already. He says, for your sake, we are being put to death all day long. We are considered sheep to be slaughtered. It's a perspective, right? Those who are followers of the way have always been hated, always will be hated, always will be targeted. Right. Nothing we can do about it. But we understand that the hatred that we suffer has really, okay. Have you paid attention that people can say anything, everything about any other people? But as soon as the mention of Yeshua, as soon as the mention of our Elohim in any kind of way, it just brings up such an offense, right? I was just reading the story. I think it was in Virginia. They had an assembly, and in the assembly, they invited this guy to come, and it was kind of like a free period, whatever they did. And they invited this guy to come. He was like a minister or something, minister of some sort, and they had like a religious assembly, and that was up in arms. And so the children staged the walkout, because they were upset about their rights being infringed upon, making them have, and really it was a free, you didn't have to vote. It's a free period for you to do whatever you want to do, but the assembly was offered, and a couple of the teachers, mistakenly said, okay, well, all the blacks have to go. So, but it wasn't mandated that everybody go. And so it became a big thing, and you're infringing upon my rights, and all of a sudden, infringing upon constitutional rights comes to light because of any sort of a reference. You know, the understanding of who he is offensive to it. Offensive to what? And no matter what we do, we want to be wise as serpents or harmless as doves. We want to understand the reality of how we communicate. We want to be able to do that. But understand, sometimes no matter how loving you are, because of the skewed perspective of the world system, because people now have exchanged the understanding of right for wrong and wrong for right and good for evil is so twisted in the minds of people. Understand, no matter how loving and no matter how you approach things with the heart of the Father for people, again, you cannot own people's response to what you give. Understand that people hate us because they hated him. Already told us that. They hate you because they hated me. The hatred, the persecution that we experience is not about us. It's all about who it is that we serve, who it is that we worship, who it is that we follow. That's the reality. And it's going to be offensive. Nothing we can do about it. So I expect for people to be. I don't expect, for so many people. A lot of times, there's a disappointment if you think everybody's going to embrace. And then what you can't do is you can't compromise to the point where we say, oh, we're just doing this so that we can reach them. And sometimes it's not. All it is compromise. And I know we use the terminology relevance, but relevance is really close to compromise. Truly is. Because we've never been commanded anywhere to be relevant. Right? This is not what we do and how we believe and how we live is not a fad. Okay? This is not a momentary thing. This is not a phase we're going through. This is our life for the rest of our life, for all of our life. So he says, for your sake, we've been put to death all day long. We're considered sheep to be slaughtered. No, verse 37, in all these things, we are super conquerors or more than conquerors through the one who has loved us. For I am convinced, now you got to understand who is writing this. Shaul is writing this, right? And experienced a lot of suffering. For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor other heavenly rulers, neither what exists, nor what is coming, neither powers above or powers below, or any other created thing will be able to separate us from the love of God, which comes to us through the Messiah. Now, I do understand that he's talking about the love of the Father. I understand the love of the Father toward us. But he's also talking about the love of the Father in us. Nothing separates us from his love. And because nothing separates us from his love again is being shed abroad in our hearts through our Kodesh. We have the ability to endure what we endure, knowing that we are both loved and still have the capacity to love as he loved. What kind of love makes you say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do? What kind of love makes Stephen say to the Father while he's being stoned, while he's being persecuted, don't lay this to their charge? So his love is a factor. His love within our hearts, his love to us, and his love in us gives us that capacity, that ability to be able to endure persecution that we have to endure. Because remember, I think we talked about before, we talked about anti-Messiah. But the one thing that cannot happen, work the fake miracles, all that kind of stuff like that, the one thing that the adversary cannot do in any way, shape, form, or fashion is truly, genuinely love. Can't happen. Why? Matter of fact, Yeshua, love is so important. It's so important that it is the one thing that is made a reference. God is love. Yeshua tells his common disciples, men shall know that you belong to me, not by the title, not by the border of your cloak or your robe, not by the tassels. They will know that you belong to me by the fact that that's the reality. We identify ourselves as humans because of our ability to love as he loves. So let's look in First Corinthians chapter 4. Because I really wanted to bring this home with the understanding of this treasure. First Corinthians chapter 4, verse number 6. Again, written by a very persecuted man, a very harshly persecuted man. Watch this. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse number 6. Oh, 5, verse number 5. For what we are proclaiming is not ourselves, but the Messiah Yeshua as ruler, with ourselves as slaves for you because of Yeshua. For it is, Yahweh once said, let light shine out of darkness, who has made his light shine in our hearts, the light of the knowledge of God's glory shining in the face of the Messiah Yeshua. But we have this treasure in clay jars, so that it will be evident that such overwhelming power comes from Yah and not from us. The overwhelming power. We have a treasure. King James says it, y'all. We have this treasure in earthly vessels. Okay, text says we have this treasure in clay jars. Again, listen to the wording. It does not use the terminology of treasure. I mean, if you say a treasure, it could be anything. Anything, right? Because different people treasure different things. But the terminology is we have this treasure. What is this treasure that he's specifically talking about? We have this treasure in earthly vessels, just as we have this treasure in clay jars, that it will be evident. Now, why is it there? That it will be evident that such overwhelming power comes from God, not from us. Then he says, we have all kinds of troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, yet not in despair, persecuted, yet not abandoned, knocked down, yet not destroyed. We always carry in our bodies the dying of Yeshua, so that the life of Yeshua may be made manifest in our bodies. Now, there's also a reference that Shaul made at one point, where he goes through his resume. He talks about who he was, of the tribe of Benjamin, circumcised on the 8th day, according to the covenant, teacher, he goes through his whole resume about who he was. He says, I count all of that as nothing done, almost, for the ecstasy of knowledge of him. And then he said, I don't want to be found in him having my own righteousness, okay, which is of the legalistic approach. He says, but I want to know him. Two ways he identifies: in the power of his resurrection and in the fellowship of his son. So he's still talking about, in the same reference that he's writing to the Corinthians, he's still talking about the reality of suffering. And he tells them, okay, we have the treasure. Now, man, nowhere in the context of what he's talking about is he talking about anything that has to do with gold and silver and rubies and diamonds. Nowhere is he talking about any of this reference. So when he's talking about this treasure that we have in earthen vessels, the excellency, the King James says like this, that the excellency may be of him and not of us. He says here that this overwhelming power comes from the Most High and not from us. It's going to be evident. Why? Because the Most High gives to us the treasure before he gives us the trouble. Because he's faithful, right? He doesn't make us suffer that above which we're able to stand. But he's given to us something that gives us the ability to rejoice in tribulation. He's given us something that gives us the ability to actually be able to endure what we do endure and do it with the love of the Most High and do it with peace that passes all understanding and do it with joy that is unspeakable, that is full of glory. He gives to us something prior to the trouble that if we would embrace the treasure, it gives us the ability to actually. Let's look a little bit further. Turn back to the book of Isaiah. Because the word treasure here is the Hebrew word atzah. It means strength and trouble. But look at Isaiah. Look at Isaiah 30. So, Isaiah 33. Look at verse number 2. O Most High, show us mercy. We have waited for you. Be their arm every morning and our salvation in the time. At the sound of the tumult, the people wander off. When you exalt yourself, the nations are scattered. Your spoil is gathered as if stripped by shearer worms. They run over it like the swarm locusts. The Most High is exalted, for he dwells on high. He has filled Zion with justice and right. Look at this. He will be the stability of your times, a wealth of salvation, wisdom, and knowledge, and fear of the Most High, which is his treasure. He will be the stability of your times, a wealth of salvation, wisdom, and knowledge, and fear of the Most High, which is his treasure. Fear of the Most High, his wisdom, his knowledge. Where do we get his wisdom, his knowledge? Where do we get it from? We get it from his Torah. Think about it for a minute. We have a treasure that he has given to us. We have the possession of something extremely valuable that gives us the insight. What is okay? Before I make this, just go to Psalm 119 and go to verse 160. Psalm 119, verse 160. Okay, so he says, "Princes persecute me for no reason, but my heart stands in all of your words." Okay, look at that for a minute. He says, "I'm being persecuted by these princes," or you could say principalities. You know, I'm being persecuted. He says, "Princes persecute me for no reason, but my heart stands in all of your words." Okay, is the focus even on the persecution? No, it's not even on persecution. It's like, okay, it's almost like the persecution is a footnote in the sense. Because he says, "I'm being persecuted but my heart is rejoicing in your word. My heart stands in awe of your words. I'm looking at how awesome you are. I'm looking at the reality of your word. Watch. He says, I take joy in your promise, like someone who finds much loot. I hate falsehood, I detest it, but I love your Torah. I praise you 7 times a day because of your righteous rulings. Those who love your Torah have great peace, shalom, and nothing makes them stumble. I hope for your deliverance, O Most High. I obey your mitzvah. You see, the connection is there. The connection is there with the obedience, with the connection to obedience, to embracing, focusing on his Torah, focusing on the truth of his word, is what gives us the ability to be able to do. He says, my soul observe your instruction. I love it so much. I observe your precepts and instruction for my ways by hope. I can take what I have to take. I can take the persecution because my heart is fixed on your words. My joy comes from your promise. I found much loot. I found much treasure. This right here, your Torah, your word, the focus on your Torah, the focus on your promise is what gets me through what I have to go through. In this world, you have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. John chapter 15, he says, these things have I spoken to you, that my joy might remain in you, and your joy might be full. Peace I leave to you, but not as the world. All the while he's telling them about what they're going to have to suffer, what they're going to have to go through, he's telling them, I have spoken my word. I have given my word to you. I have given to you that which produces wisdom, knowledge, understanding, that which produces the fear of wisdom, that produces fear of the Most High. I've given that to you. And because of that, I don't fear the person who can do harm to just the body. Fear, the reference, is for the person who does both harm to body and soul, can destroy soul and body. That's where my focus is. Not on this person who is doing whatever they're doing. All they can do is get me out of this body. That's it. So Charlotte was like, for me to live is Messiah. For me to die, it's okay. I don't even count my life as years. What I want to focus on is communicating the truth that he's given to me. What I want to focus on is telling you, I still want to tell you, even in my dying moment, even when they get ready to chop my head off, I want to just focus on telling you the truth and communicating to you the truth. Because what was in them, they were witness, they had seen the truth, they had known the understanding, they had gained the knowledge, they had been anchored in their connection, their relationship with the Messiah, and understood that although trouble came. This is why Yeshua could tell them in John the 14th chapter, don't let your heart be troubled. You believe in me? No. Don't allow what the trouble that you may be experiencing in the culture, heart to be troubled. Let your heart be fixed on my word, my truth, my Torah. You're gonna have the wisdom. You're gonna have the ability. You're gonna have the love. You're gonna have everything that is essential, that is necessary for you to actually be able to do what it is you have to do. You'll be able to endure the persecution if you're not focused on it. If you're not focused on self and self-preservation, what's more important to me is not my own self-preservation. What's more important to me is that this truth is communicated. So even if my last breath is just me communicating the reality of this truth, and it is what it is. In him, we live and move and have our being anyway. So to be absent from the body is to be present. So I'm not even concerned about the reality if I have to face this body. And if I have to be persecuted to the point of even losing my life. Because my focus is not even here. So persecution, actually the persecution becomes minimal. The persecution or the magnitude of the persecution is minimized from my perspective when I focus on not the persecution, not the big thing. If I'm focused on the persecution, yeah, my humanity is like, I can't do that. No. I want to live a little longer. Right? Want to be able to experience, the goodness of life. Persecution, if I focus on the persecution too much, that human element starts to rise in. But if I understand that my persecution has purpose, and I understand that purpose is developing my character, developing his character, his nature within me, and it is producing my hope. Hope is in him. Persecution is minimized. And it's almost like if you read it, just me when I'm looking at it, it's almost like if persecution is like I guess the big thing that has to do with all of it, it's almost like really compared to is that all? So you get to Romans 8 chapter, verse 18, and Shaul is saying stuff like, I recognize that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us. It talks about in one place, I fight affliction, for more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. It's like we kind of understand that what he is producing in us, or what we are eventually looking to experience and embrace, what I suffer at the moment, no matter what the degree of it is, it's not even comparable. Right? It's okay that I suffer persecution. Okay. Persecution, oh, that's hard. Okay, I'll take it. It's just understanding that, when you understand it from the proper perspective, persecution is not such a big thing. I have to admit, even in my own understanding, my own thought process, I thought about persecution and I'm looking at the reality of how things are headed and that's the direction they're headed in. I thought to myself, wow, persecution, but then as I started looking at this, I'm like, okay, persecution really is not supposed to be a big to us. Persecution is like, oh, and I thought this is what I thought about. I thought about how children in certain countries, even children, are trained to be suicide bombers. I read some things, actually saw some pictures of little 8-year-old boys with machine guns and stuff like that in the where they have like little play bomb vests and stuff like that strapped because they teach them from a little bitty child that it's worth it to die for the cause of life, especially at the destruction of the unbelievers. That's what they do. And I thought about they're willing to do that, like willingly put a bomb on themselves. Now, the Most High does not require that of us. Okay? It does require us to be living sacrifices. And hey, if it comes to that point where we lose our life for the sake of the truth, for the sake of okay, so be it. If it comes to that point, we got examples of how to do it. We see it. Everything was written for our learning. It's okay. I already know. That's how it ends up. That's how it ends up. So be it. But I thought that they willingly, look at 9/11, willingly sacrifice, put themselves in harm's way, all for the cause of an idol, all for the cause of and willingly do it, knowing that once I strap this bomb on myself and go into this building, and once I detonate this, me and everybody else is dying when this happens. Who willingly do that for an idol? I thought to myself, how much more? of my comfort, give of my convenience for the cause of righteousness and for the cause of truth. And it hit me less. We're going to get that. Go back to chapter 5. Verse 10. How blessed are those who are persecuted because they pursue righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. How blessed you are when people insult you and persecute you and tell all kinds of vicious lies about you because you follow me. Rejoice, be glad, because your reward in heaven is great. Persecute the prophets before you. Okay, so hey, if I'm persecuted, when we're persecuted, I have an example to show me how they suffer, how they endure the persecution. But I know my focus can be on the fact that I'm being persecuted, or the reality, or the possibility of persecution. It can't be that. It has to be on the reality that there's a reward for whatever I say. Oh, Most High, thank you so much for the truth of your word. Your word takes root in us. We give you glory, honor, and praise in Jesus' name. Father, give us the capacity to embrace the reality, Father. Know that persecution is so sure it is upon us, Father. But your word has told us that we're blessed. We're persecuted for righteousness. Help us, Father, not to ever compromise righteousness for convenience or to compromise truth, Father, to avoid persecution. But we thank you that we get to participate and we get to know you in both the power of your resurrection and in the fellowship of your Son. Bless you and honor you. Thank you now that you be blessed and keep us and make your face to shine upon us, your gracious to us. You give unto us your shalom. You put your name upon us, your people. You have blessed us. Go now, care of your God. In Yeshua's name.